Here we go. Peace, salam, and shalom to all of you. My name is Sophia Saeed. I am the Executive Director of the Interfaith Center, your host and moderator for our Dream Workshop today. The Interfaith Center has the mission to reduce the fear and prejudice among world religions, and we do that by providing education, interfaith dialogue, and relationship building opportunities. We also teach spiritual practices that invite the participants to connect with divine while also connecting with people of other faith traditions. And this 8-part Dream Workshop series is part of our spiritual and interfaith explorations. With that, I'm going to bring our teacher on screen, Reverend Susan Sims Smith, who is our, I hope you can see both of us, who's our teacher, a Jungian oriented psychotherapist, an Episcopal priest, who has been teaching people how to listen to wisdom through their dreams and meditation for years now. I'm going to share Susan's website in the chat box, which I always do, where you can always go and find a lot more resources about dreams. Last week, we talked about experiences with divine through dreams. And today we will be talking about how we discern whether an experience that we had or a message that we received in a dream is divine guidance or is it human ego. So since our sessions are recorded, I please request you to mute yourself so we can have a pleasant recording, and it is available to you on our YouTube channel. With that, Susan, that's it for my opening announcements. Do you want to start?
Okay, so we have 3 more sessions after today. July the 19th, next Wednesday, we're going to talk about dreams and meditation and how going deeply into meditation deepens the dream process and how going deeply into dreams deepens the meditation process. We will also practice meditating together. Most of you know how to meditate. For those of you who don't, I'll teach an introductory meditation technique. Then the week after that, on July the 26th, we're going to talk about dreams and our relationships with other humans. And that's a place where I find dreams to be extremely helpful, whether it's in a marriage or a friendship or with a colleague. The dreams are filled with information about maybe places in us that we need to access more for healthy relationships, or places in us that we are unaware where we're doing something that's not helping in a relationship. But the dreams are very practical when it comes to relationships. And then last week, we're going to do the one that is my favorite because it is so intriguing. And it's going to be dreams related to life after death. And it'll be dreams that people have had before they died, experiences that they had. It'll be family members' dreams after somebody's died. And many of you all will have had those yourselves, or you will know people that have. So those are our next 3 weeks. The last 2 weeks, on August the 26th, July the 26th and August the 2nd, I would like to conclude with the way that we began. I'd like to stay an extra 30 minutes, both to work on more dreams and to just have a more free-flowing conversation. Sophia, I forgot to ask you today, would that be possible? Is there any technology reason that we couldn't do that?
No, I don't think. And you're talking about the last class session.
The 26th, July the 26th and August the 2nd, the last 2 classes. We did that at the beginning and I think it was helpful, and I'd like to do it again at the end.
I can totally do that.
The other thing is I can't guarantee that this is going to happen, but I'm working to find a therapist that's really into dreams who would be willing to start a dream group for any of you who might want to do something like that. So I'm in conversation trying to make that happen, because it is really, really fun to be in a dream group on a regular basis, especially with a trained, mature, spiritually oriented person. So I'll let you know how that goes. So today we are also talking about one of my favorite topics, because it's all of this stuff, when you get deeply into it, it's extremely practical. So discernment, we've talked about how we have our higher self, and our higher self, or our truest self, is actually one with God. So our will at our deepest level, when you can connect with the deepest part of you, your will and God's will are actually the same. And since we run a lot of our lives based on our more familiar ego, our primary selves, our more familiar daily selves, we're often making our decisions based on not our deepest, truest self. And so there are many ways to listen to your deepest, truest self: prayer, meditation, nature, scripture study, worship, the tradition, your faith tradition, and certainly dreams. So when you're listening to God through prayer and meditation, dreams and books and other things, and you think that you have heard God telling you something, we all want and need processes and filters and lenses to discern, are we hearing this deeper wisdom, or are we hearing our own ego? Now, I'll preface it by saying I made a decision a long time ago that I would rather be dead wrong in my interpretation of my prayer life and my dreams, and occasionally get it wrong, than not to try to listen for God in those ways. And I have gotten it wrong before. I'll give you one notorious example. And my only excuse for it is I was really young and extremely anxious. So my husband and I were building a house. It was a house we were stretching to be able to afford. We were deeply into it, and all of the progress had just slowed to a standstill. And I had a dream one night that our builder had died. So I was in my late 30s. I probably didn't know as much as I know now that dream images are about when somebody's dying. It means usually that part of you is transforming. But I was really young, and I was really scared that I was going to get in over my head on this house building project. And I got afraid that this guy, my contractor, was going to actually die. And a day or two after that, I heard through the grapevine that he had gone on a canoe trip and that he had passed out in the canoe, and somebody had to make sure he got safely home. But he got safely home and he came back to work. And I was anxious enough and immature enough that I sat down with him and talked to him about the dream that I had dreamt that he was going to die. So this poor man, I mean, he did forgive me eventually, but it was a clear situation where I thought I had heard God, and I was so afraid, and I didn't use maturity and good judgment, and I didn't look within to see what part of me might be transforming. And so the man forgave me. We're still friends. We've had a wonderful relationship, but he was terrified in the moment, because here is this psychotherapist who's telling him she's had a dream that he's going to die. So it wasn't my finest moment, I will tell you that much. At the same time, I would rather try to listen to God through my dreams and through meditation, and occasionally make a mistake, than lose this rich wealth of opportunity. So if you try to listen to God, even if you use all the discernment wisdom, you will occasionally make a mistake. The other thing I want to talk about, and my priest friend, the Reverend Chris Keller, has helped me see this a little more clearly. So in the chat, there's going to be an electronic version of the House of Prayer newsletter. If you don't already get it, you're going to want to get it. It is a fabulous piece of wisdom, and it comes out twice a year, and it's really good reading. So you can send an email to the House of Prayer and tell them you want to be on their email list and you want to receive a paper copy or an electronic copy It's called Seeking Silence. And last fall, the theme of the issue was on discernment, which is what we're talking about today. So Chris Keller contributed a section to the lead article in which he reminds us that God both makes God's will known, and God also keeps some of God's will clouded, partly because God wants us to have free will. So if God just dictated to us, do this, do that, do the other, then we would be more robotic in our surrender. We wouldn't be going through a discernment process, and we wouldn't have choices. So I'm going to read you a quote. You'll have this quote because it'll be in the chat, but I want to read you a quote from Chris that I love. And this kind of fits with the theme that we've been exploring as a group of humility and dream images not being fixed and not being concretized, and us not always being 100% sure that we're correct. So it's not that we don't know anything from listening to a dream. We can learn a ton, but we approach it with a certain humility. Well, that's what Chris is going to say in this quote about how we approach listening for God's will. So I'll quote, God's will is to a certain degree obscure, Reverend Keller said. I think if it weren't, we wouldn't be able to live up to the full measure of what it means to be a thinking and a choosing person who has a responsibility for our own life, which is part of the glory of being human. It takes a certain obscurity on God's part for us to have that freedom. But though obscure, God is present. So that's a fascinating veil that he is describing, that sometimes God makes her will totally clear, just crystal clear, and other times the veiled nature of it puts a responsibility on us, the spiritual seekers, to listen, and also that we have choices. So I want to walk through something else that you're going to find in your newsletter when you look at it. So Sophia, you can put that up now or not. It doesn't matter. Let's don't put it up. Okay. Well, I don't know. Just go ahead. What do you think? Can you put it up there easily? You're muted.
Yes, so Chris's quote is already there in the chat box, and while you speak, I'm going to share this.
Okay, so before we read this, let me just tell you that it was written by a Christian writer and added to by the Trinity Episcopal Cathedral Dream Group. And it ends with something about listening to God through Jesus Christ. Since we are an interfaith group, that needs to be edited for us. And I did not have the technical skills to change the number 11 and then number 13. So let me just preface it by saying when it says Christ, please substitute the word divine. Okay. So a really wonderful older woman wrote a book called To Pray and to Grow. Her name is Flora Slauson Woolner. And that book is on the book list on my website if you want it. And it's all about prayer. It is a very powerful, wonderful, amazing book about prayer. And it has a section in it about listening for God's will. And she lists things that she believes are signs of whether something is God's will or not God's will. And the Trinity Dream Group that I was involved in at that time took those things and added some things to it and enriched it. So this is a combination from her book and from that dream group. So let's say I've had a dream and I've really worked on it and I've thought about it, and I believe God has told me that I am supposed to go to India or whatever you think God's told you to do. Sell your house, be kinder to your neighbor, get a dog, give money away, whatever it is you think that the divine has told you to do. If you walk it through these questions, it really helps make some wisdom. Is this just an idea that you have had, or might it really be something that Spirit is stirring in you? So the first one is this thing that I believe God is telling me, is it harmful? Do I feel free or compelled? If we feel compelled, I have to do this. That's very much like I felt with the contractor on my house. I felt anxious and compelled, like I had to go talk to this guy. That's a sign that it might or might not be from the divine. The second, does the course of action take into account the obvious facts of my situation? Do circumstances seem to be shifting of their own accord to accommodate this course of action? So if you believe God has told you to do something and it seems completely impossible that you would be able to do it, it's possible that the circumstances of life will change so that you will be able to do that, or it's possible that you're not hearing. The third one is really important. Does the course of action feel natural? Does it seem to fit? The fourth one, in retrospect, what have been the fruits of my choice? So if I'm trying to listen to God in prayer and dreams and meditation, other ways, and then I look back and I can ask, has my listening generally been productive for me and for other people and for the community? The next one is number 5. Even though individuation sometimes means going against mainstream culture, is this a decision that I can put before the broader community, at least for discussion? So we know in the prophetic tradition in all the religions that sometimes prophets have been asked to do something that totally goes against mainstream culture. So they're being asked to break all the rules. Jesus did it, Muhammad did it, Abraham did it, Moses did it. They're not asked to be rule perpetuators. They're being asked to do some special thing that needs to be done. So sometimes when you listen to God's will, it may be that you're being asked to do something that your family or spiritual group can't support. At the same time, that's rare. Most of us are not prophets. So if you ask this question, is this a decision that I can put before the broader community, at least for discussion? If you think that God has told you to do something and you don't feel like you can really discuss that with your 2 or 3 closest friends or with anybody in your spiritual community, that's a red flag. That doesn't mean it's not God's will. Maybe you're being given prophetic guidance, but is definitely a caution. When I was a young therapist, a woman came to me from a very traditional and super conservative religious church. And she told me that she believed that God was telling her to have an affair with this particular man that owned this particular business. And because she wanted to have the affair, she then talked her super conservative husband into the idea that they should have an open marriage and he should also have affairs. And so she really believed that that was from God. And she did not want to talk to any of her friends. She did not want to talk to any of her clergy, nobody in her church. She really didn't want to talk to me, except she was so depressed she didn't have a choice. She had to talk to me about it. And it turned out to be a disaster for her, a disaster for the man with whom she had the affair, a disaster for his family, a disaster for her husband, a disaster for the marriage, a disaster for the children. So if you go back to the one that says what kind of fruits came from it, she both could not talk to anybody about it because she knew they wouldn't support it, and it produced a mess. Number 6, is the message persistent? Am I hearing it from a number of sources? So when I began to be called to be an Episcopal priest, I was a therapist. I wasn't thinking of being a priest. The message was persistent. It was multiple dreams over a long, long period of time. And I heard it from more than one source. Number 7, is the action required of me or of other persons? Am I hearing something that has my name on it? Or is there somebody else that needs to be the person doing that? Maybe it's something that God wants done, but does it have my name on it? You know, there's a set of discernment questions. What is needed here? Is now the time? Is it mine to do? So maybe we're hearing something that is God's will, and that we have to reflect, okay, what's needed in the situation? Is it mine to do? And is now the time? Number 8, could I be rationalizing some compulsive behavior? Do I have some pattern that's just mine to do, mine to do, mine to do? And I think my dream is telling me to keep doing that. Number 9, am I willing to take no for an answer? Now, that is not easy. Most of us don't really want to take no for an answer. And then as I live out this course of action, am I growing in the love of the divine? And is the world around me becoming brighter and more colorful? The divine is not usually calling us into stuff that just walks us right into the heart of depression and anxiety and filth and whatever. I mean, it can happen, but that's not the norm. Number 11, do I have a growing sense of connectedness to God's love? So, you know, every year as we evolve, what really happens is we're actually becoming more of a channel for love. We are able to love more people, not fewer people. We're able to feel God's love for us more and able to give it out more. Number 12, am I growing in my ability to show this love to others? And then the most important thing in discernment is seeking to live out the love of God. Keep that central. So if we adapt those 13 things to take the Christian specific language out of it, and we ask that the decisions that we think that we are hearing, that they are processed through these different filters. So you have a chance to let your discernment and your wisdom mature and season up. So I want to give you an example of, I told you that when I was being called into the priesthood, that I had many, many different dreams about it. And I would have one and I would say to my husband, you know, I think I'm going to have to go to seminary someday. And he would say, I hope not. And I would have more dreams and I would tell him the dreams and I'd say, yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's where spirit is moving me. And it went on for a long time, well over a year, maybe 2 years. And the dreams were deeply affected. At that time, I was a psychotherapist, and I had a psychotherapist woman coming to me for therapy. And she was a very, very independently wealthy woman. And she kept saying to me, although I have all this money, what I really have is the Eucharist. And she would hold her hand up in the shape of a chalice. And she kept going back to what she really had was her relationship with God. And for her, that came primarily through the liturgy of the Eucharist. That woman telling me that started seeding the priest place in me. She never knew it. She died before I was ordained. But she was telling me her source of connection to the divine. And it was like a tuning fork. And she was vibrating that energetic field into my own psyche. And that is part of what helped stir up the dreams. So the dreams continued on and on and on. And I'll just give you one example. If you read in a book about archetypes, a dog sometimes is a symbol for a priest. And the idea is that in Christianity, in my tradition, Christ is the shepherd, and the sheepdog tries to herd the sheep and bring them to the shepherd tries to keep them safe, tries to protect them. So sometimes the unconscious likes to use the image of dog to talk about the priesthood. It uses dog for 1,000 other things, but that's one. And I continued to dream night after night about this really healthy little puppy. And if I was in the daytime, if I was saying no to exploring the priesthood, at night, I would dream that the puppy got stuck under the house. In the daytime, if I was taking steps toward the priesthood, I would dream that I had this beautiful little baby puppy and he was so healthy and he didn't have any fleas. So the puppy theme went on and on and on, but that was not enough to move me toward ordination. Eventually, I had a dream with a client of mine that I adored, and where I'd been really, really close to this woman and helped save her life. She showed up in my dream and said, "You're leaving your psychotherapy office." And I argue with her in the dream. I said, "I'm not." She said, "You are." I said, "I'm not." She said, "You are, but you just don't know it yet." I still didn't want to go to seminary. I still didn't want to leave my therapy office. I didn't want a boss. I didn't want a lower salary. I didn't want a crummy office. I didn't want to work on the weekends. I didn't want a bunch of men telling me what to do, and I was not interested. So then after my everyday self said all that negative stuff, this was my next dream. My next dream was a bunch of hoodlums came into my office with M16 machine guns, and they were going to shoot me out of there. They're going to drive me out. And I woke up from that and I said, the unconscious is getting really serious about this ordination thing. That still did not do it. So I want to tell you the dream when I finally said, okay, I get it. I'm going to have to surrender to this. So I was in Canada studying and doing my own inner work with a Jungian analyst named Marion Woodman. And when I tell you this dream, you'll be able to see Chris Keller's teaching about how God gives you a choice, because God wants your soul to make its own decisions, and it's laid out in this dream. So this is the dream. I have a dream where my husband's grandmother, a woman that I admired, respected, loved, and was greatly loved by, she shows up, and she had passed away by that time, and she's radiant. And she said, "Susan, you have 3 choices. The first one is," she showed me what we would call an old-fashioned steamer trunk that people used to use if they were going to go on a trip around the world on a ship. They would put their things in a steamer trunk. She said, "You may have this steamer trunk and travel the world. That's one option that you have." Then she said, "Or you can be a doctor's wife." So my husband's a physician. "You can be a doctor's wife," whatever that means. But that was another thing. She said, "You can do that." Or then she takes a little silver plate, and in Christianity, we would call it a paten. And a paten is used in the Eucharist to serve the consecrated bread for people to have more of a connection with Christ. She holds up this little silver plate. She says, "Or you can take this paten and serve the bread of Christ." So in the dream, my highest self has finally activated. And I say in the dream, "I want to take that paten." So you can see I had choices. The divine did not come in and say to me, "You are going to be a priest. I'm telling you, you have to do it." It was a choice. And finally, I had other choices. Finally, the deepest self finally wiggled out of all of its old rules and plans and structures and paradigms, and the soul got to rise up and say, "That's what I want." My deepest soul had a chance to vote. So I called my husband from Canada the next morning. I said, "It's not maybe, I need to go to seminary, and we need to figure out how we're going to do that." Now, those of you that have worked with institutional church, just because you hear a call to the priesthood does not mean that the church rises up and calls you blessed and tells you you're going to be ordained and go to seminary. I mean, it's a long process to get the church to say, we agree with your call and we'll help it happen. But anyway, that was my interior process that allowed me to have a long time, at least a year, maybe 2 years, of dreams to help my daily self begin to think through this and to finally let my soul stand up and say, I agree with, I want this, I want to do this. So I think at this point, we're going to just stop for question, answers, comments. And then in a little bit, Sophia is going to teach us a Muslim practice for discernment and for asking for God's will. And then we'll work on a dream. But let's just take a moment. It could just be a comment, a question, a sharing, whatever you want.
Yes, I have a question.
Hi, Skip.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for a great presentation. I've been wondering, I was thinking about what you were saying about discernment, and I was also thinking about what Sophia said about there are 3 types of dreams, one of which can be demonic. Did I get that correctly, Sophia?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And I was wondering where shadow figures play to discernment and distinguishing when it's not your shadow. So that's my question.
Maybe in a few minutes when Sophia is sharing, she might say a few words about demonic. Sophia, is that the word that's used in Islam, demonic dreams?
So no, the word that I used was true dreams and false dreams can come from Satan or evil spirits. Yeah, so I think demonic is a word we can use for that. I'm not familiar.
When Sophia's teaching in a minute, I'm gonna ask her to comment on that. So I'll tell you what I know about it. There probably are dreams that I'm missing or not tuned into that fit into that category that Sophia is talking about, but I am not aware of them. So I can't teach you anything about dreams that come from Satan because I have not seen one. That doesn't mean they don't exist. So what I have seen is evil in a dream that has access to the person only through their shadow. So my Jungian analyst teacher, Hal Stone, says that the only way evil can have access to a person is through the person's shadow, their own part of them that they're unaware of, that can do things that's bad for other people. So I've seen a dream where a person figured out that their addiction was like some bad person putting heroin in children's Halloween candy. So the unconscious represented addiction as candy for the inner child. But instead of it being a piece of candy, it actually had heroin in it and they got hooked on it. And the person in the dream figures out that this is going on and they go in front, confront the bad guy and tell him, I figured out what you're doing. I figured out that you're putting heroin in candy for children and I'm going to stop you. And then the next thing that happens in the dream is that this bad guy completely overwhelms them. So that has a connection to evil because evil loves to mess with people through addiction. And until that everyday self gets healthy enough, gets strong enough, probably gets an AA support team, maybe gets a therapist. I mean, they're going to have to posse up to be able to deal with their addiction. Just saying, okay, I get it. My child is getting a treat. It's like candy, but it's really an addiction. In the face of addiction, that's not going to do anything. So the shadow is what is in us that we don't know about. And we need to be able to take responsibility for things that are in there, because evil can come in and do bad things through what we are doing that we're not aware that we're doing. So Skip, let me be quiet. I know Sophia's going to respond in a minute, but repeat your question and let's see if I responded to it.
Yeah, I think you did. I think of the simplistic phrase of ignorance of my shadow can lead to evil.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
get that. Yeah.
So in a minute, when we get back to Sophia, we'll get her to say more about it. Have we given an initial?
And I just wondered what role, also what in general, what role does shadow play in discernment?
Well, that is maybe one of the very most important things in discernment is, you want to know what is in your unconscious that is not helpful for you and for your relationships and for your family. And a lot of what is going on in the dream process. I mean, it's not all grim, but a significant portion of what's happening in the dream process is, you're getting an opportunity to look at what's in your unconscious that's not helpful. So a nightmare, which we all have, is when we've gone against what's good for us or good for others in daily life. That stirs up a nightmare. And that can tell you what is in your shadow, because you can say, okay, what was I doing to myself or to others or not doing that I needed to do on the 2 or 3 days before the dream? Because that's where the nightmare comes from. So the shadow and discernment are kind of walk hand in hand, because you want to have a gentle, kind, self-loving, self-compassionate, ongoing look at what's in your own shadow. And the two places that I know of that can give you a movie of your own stinky stuff are your dreams and your relationships. If I don't know what I've done that is not good for humanity in the last month, all I need to do is pick up my dream journal. And in the last month, I will be able to tell you 2 or 3 things that I've done that were not good for people that I love or not good for the community, because the dreams are an ongoing conversation about that. And I don't mean every night a nightmare, but that's a good place to look for the shadow. The other place is in your relationships. If we don't know what our shadow is, ask the people that live around us. I mean, Rick Smith can tell you in 1 minute, he's so nice, he probably wouldn't want to do it. He wouldn't be happy to tell on me, but he would know exactly, what has her shadow been like in the last couple of weeks? And he can tell you because he has to bump into it. So our relationships and our dreams are MRIs of our shadow, and we need that. We need somebody that loves us enough to tell us the truth about our brokenness, and the dreams will do it, and a really good friend can do it, and sometimes some nasty enemies can do it too. That's really not fun, because they're going to tell you your shadow with a lot of criticism. Okay, other comments or hands that are up?
Thank you.
Sophia, why don't you share what you were going to share?
Okay, here we go. Let me spotlight it. Okay, let's talk about the practice of istikhara. So I am going to talk briefly about a Muslim practice. Let me put the name in the chat right here, which is called istikhara. So in the last few classes, I did talk about, in our theology, we are told there are three kinds of dreams: good dreams or true dreams, false dreams, which come from evil spirits that William or Skip talked about, and dreams from subconscious. So dreams, there was a time I shared this story too, when the prophet said that the revelation that will come from prophets have ended with his death, which put Muslims into despair, and people were worried and concerned. God will not speak to us anymore. So at that time, he said that no, dreams are also a part of prophecy. So when you see a dream, that is a direct communication with, that could be a direct communication with God. So due to that reason, we Muslims take dreams very, very seriously, because it could be potentially a communication with God, if it's a true dream. And in that communication, we can either receive guidance that we are talking about today, or we can receive glad tidings about something, or good news about something which is going to happen, or warnings about some things. So there are multiple purposes to dreams. So Susan asked me to talk about how we receive guidance through dreams. So there is a very, and there are again many ways to receive guidance through dreams. I am going to talk about only one specific practice that I do, and it's a very common practice. Many Muslims engage into it. It's called istikhara, which is an Arabic word, and I put it in the chat box. The word literally means seeking goodness. Ist means seeking, and khair means goodness. So it means seeking goodness, but in our Islamic theology, istikhara means asking God or asking divine for the infinite wisdom in an issue in which we are confused about, and hoping that we will be directed towards a solution which is better for us. And it's a very specific prayer, in the sense that it's not, we don't do istikhara just to receive. If I want to get married and I need guidance, I just don't do istikhara to receive guidance on marriage. This practice is specifically when I need to make a decision, and I have two choices, and I want to pick which choice is better for me, and I'm not able to decide on my own, because again, we are told in our theology that first rely on our own heart and our own mind and make our own decisions. And then if we cannot do that, then we go to others around us for advice. And if we cannot even do that, we are still confused, then here is a tool which God gave us, which is called istikhara. And Muslims generally really engage into this practice for multiple reasons. And I've been thinking about it today. Often it's about deciding in a matter of marriage, like if you want to get married to somebody and you want to seek God's guidance, if this is the right decision for me, or if you're starting a new business, or if you're buying a property or a merchandise. So you would engage, or you would do this practice. So I called my daughter today and I asked her that, would you tell me when did the last time you did istikhara? And just to give you an example, and she said, so she has been applying to law schools recently because she wants to go into a school of her choice, and she couldn't get into it. And she got an offer from a different law school where she did not want to go initially, but then she was confused. They were giving her a wonderful package. So she told me, Mom, last time I did istikhara was when I needed to make decision about whether I accept this offer from the law school or not, which was a couple of months ago. And then she said, tonight I'm going to do my next istikhara, because she lives in New York. She's moving to California, and she needs to make a decision on an apartment that she's going to lease for 1 year. It's a huge decision for her. So tonight, again, she will do another istikhara on the apartment that she looked and whether she wants to lease it or not. So these are the kind of decisions that we use istikhara for. This practice, I believe it's a gift from God for us, because when I'm confused about a matter, I can seek guidance directly from God. It's a very powerful tool that He has given us. And now, how we do that, how I do that, is there are multiple steps to it. So, first step is being in an external state of purity and piety, which means washing myself up, dressing myself in clean clothes, and being hygienic before I perform this prayer. Then the second step is, of course, internal purity, which is um, cleaning my heart and doing sincere repentance in front of God before I do the practice. Um, then the third thing is, which is very important for any Muslim prayer, is making an intention for the prayer, which we call niyah. And the prayer is not valid without intention. So make an intention that this is a challenge that I'm having in which I need to make a decision and I need help. So that's why I'm performing this prayer. And there's a specific Arabic prayer that we read to make the intention. And then we do our regular liturgical prayer, which you might have seen on TV or other places, in which we bow and we prostrate. So I would do my regular prayer. And after my regular liturgical prayer, I would read the istikhara prayer. And it's an Arabic prayer. It's not too long, it's just a paragraph. I would read that, which is the step 7 in the steps that I told you. I try to translate it, so it's a close translation, but it's not the 100% correct translation, but it translates something like that. O Allah, O divine God, I seek your guidance in making the choice in this matter, and I name the matter at that point. O Allah, I seek your guidance in making a choice in this matter by virtue of your knowledge, and I seek ability by virtue of your power, and I ask you of your great bounty. You have the power, I have none. You know, I do not. You have the knowledge, I am empty. You are the knower of hidden things. O God, if in your knowledge this matter is good for me both in this world and the hereafter, then ordain it for me. Make it easy for me and bless it for me. And if in your knowledge it is bad for me and for my religion, my livelihood, and my affairs, then turn me away from it and ordain for me the good wherever it may be, and make me pleased with it. So this is the rough translation of that Arabic prayer. So I would read that prayer, or whoever is doing istikhara, and then I would go to sleep in hopes that I would see a dream which would help me make that decision, whether I should do this versus that. A very important thing is, at this stage, we believe that we should leave all the matters completely in God's hand for better guidance without any fear or any regret. We must suspend our own judgment in regards to that specific matter that we're looking decision for. And whatever guidance we get through our dream, we surrender to that. And that's really, really important, to truly consign the matter to divine at that time, and whatever unfolds, to accept it. So today in the morning, I also called an aunt of mine who sees a lots of dreams. And in fact, she's famous in her family that anytime anybody is going to conceive a child, she would know before the child is conceived, because she would have a dream about it. I have 2 children, and for both my children, she knew before I conceived, because she always have these dreams about who's going to have a child in near future. So I called her in the morning and I said, would you please give me an example of a dream that you have used for istikhara prayer? And she said, let me give you an example of a dream that I did not use for my istikhara prayer, which means I did istikhara. I had a dream and I did not listen to it. And I said, okay, which is very rare. Normally, either I won't do istikhara, but if I do istikhara and I see a dream and I'm able to discern it or able to interpret it in the right way, then I would follow it. So she told me that many, many years ago, almost 23, 24 years ago, when her daughter was about to be married, she did an istikhara about that specific marriage proposal. And she saw a dream at that time, which left her confused. She was not able to interpret it at that time. So she did an istikhara whether my daughter should get married to this gentleman or not. And in her dream, which she did not told me all of it, but she told me she saw transparent glass jars with fresh, raw, red meat in them. And then there was more, but that was the key thing. And she was not able to interpret it at that time. She was young, she did not know. And they went, and now she tells me that in hindsight, she knows that it was a warning because red and blood and raw meat was telling her not to engage into this relationship in whatever ways, I don't know. So anyways, they went ahead, she went ahead with the marriage, her daughter, and she got married, and 10 years, and the marriage did not work. It was a disaster for the daughter, and she stayed in it for 10 years, and then later she divorced. But she told me today that, Sophia, I had that dream in an istikhara in which I did not listen to my dream, and I still regret it. Anyway, so that's one example. Dreams before marriage is very, marriage decisions is very common. And if we, the tricky thing is how are we able to interpret the dream? Can we extract the guidance from the dream? That's very, very tricky for me. And if you're not able to do it right there and then do the prayer again the next night and the next night. My mom, I called many people today to check on their istikhara prayers. So I asked my mom, and she reminded me of her istikhara in which my brother, when he was ready to get married to this young woman, whom we all want him to get married to and him too, and my mom loved this girl too. So she did istikhara whether it's good for him and his family to get married to her. And she saw a dream, and in the dream, she saw the living room in which we live and my brother lives. And in the living room, she saw young babies and children who were unhappy and sick and crying. So in the morning, she gets up, and my mom is also a dream person. And she knew that, it's a sign that this wedding will not be good for my brother, and because they were unhappy, whatever the reason is. But their heart was so set on this marriage and this girl, she did istikhara again next, and she wouldn't do her son's marriage without God's blessings. So she did an istikhara the next day, hoping that this time she will see it's a good decision. And the next day night, in the dream, she saw the same house, and this time she saw broken um, uh, utensils, plates, spoons, and an unhappy, sad, and poor and broken household, especially with broken stuff in it. And since the heart was set on this marriage, she continued to do it over and over again for many, many nights, till probably on 27th night or something, she gave up. Like, God's telling me over and over again not to do it. So she didn't do it, but she engaged in the istikhara prayer. So anyways, I hope, Susan, I explained it well, but that's the prayer that we do when we are seeking specific guidance on a decision in which we have two choices, whether to do it or not to do it. Um, if I think of another example, I'll share. But I guess, is this good, Susan? Enough?
It's so wonderful. Let me ask 2 questions and then we'll let other people ask questions. So after your mom kept doing it, did you say she told your brother finally?
Yes, and we didn't. He and we did not went for that marriage proposal. Yeah.
So that's a really interesting cultural thing that's interesting and wonderful. The other question is, when you were originally reading the prayer, the translation in Arabic, the last sentence, or maybe the next to the last sentence, I think you said something like, if I'm not understanding it right, dear God, please take me toward the good. Can you go back and grab that little phrase at the end that where you're asking the divine to take you toward goodness, or what that was? If you don't remember it, don't worry about it.
It's on my screen. The prayer, I wrote the translation. So the last part of it, and to the God, dear God, if in your knowledge it is bad for me and for my religion and my livelihood, then turn me away from it. And we're talking about that decision that we are going to make.
So good.
Me away from it and ordain for me the good wherever it may be, and make me pleased with it. So we're telling God that if this decision that I'm going to make, this marriage decision or renting an apartment decision, is not good for me, then turn my heart away from it and give us something which is good for us. And another thing is that dream here is just a tool for istikhara prayer. Some people never see dreams, and what happens for them is they get istishara, which is a different thing. It means an expansion of the heart. So although they won't see a dream which will give them a clue whether the decision is good or bad, their heart will be either turned away from that decision or it will get set on that decision. But that confusion that we are in will be gone.
I love that the prayer says, if it's not good for me, turn me away from it, turn me toward the good, and then make me want that. It's so powerful. Let's just take a minute. We have about 4 minutes left, and see if there are comments or questions. It's very, very beautiful what you've taught us, Sophia.
Thank you. Jane has a comment. Jane, I'm going to, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, Sophia, I was wondering if there's a place where we could find that particular prayer if we wanted to pray it ourselves.
I'm happy to put the translation in the chat right now, but I'm also happy to email it to you. It's an Arabic prayer. I had to look for the translation, but I'm sending you the translation.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Anybody else?
Sophia, I would like that prayer also. This is Laura Dickey.
Laura, are you on screen? Can we see you?
Yes,
Okay, let me see.
I don't have my little hand up.
Okay, that's okay. I can't.
I unitask. I don't multitask.
You're going to send it to everybody, right, Sophia?
I'm putting it in I'm copy pasting it in the chat.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thought, question, comment?
When you read the translation, at times it says in making a choice in parentheses. So when you're reading the prayer, you actually put your own decision there. So I seek your guidance in making a choice. Instead, you say, I seek your guidance in whatever choice you're making. You name that choice there. Go ahead,
We
Susan.
we have time for one more comment.
Jennifer, I think, has her hand raised.
Okay.
There we go. I had to find my unmute. What I wanted to know was, I wrote down what you were saying as fast as I could, and you said that there were 7 steps and I only had 6. So I'm wondering what I've missed. Could you let me go through this? It's being externally pure, ablutions and cleaning, being intentionally and internally pure by sincere repentance. Is that 2? And then 3, making intentions, saying what it is that we're praying for. And number 4, the regular liturgical prayer, which would be your connection with God. And then the istikhara prayer, and then going to sleep, to dream, and to have the answer come that way. What did I miss?
So surrendering one, and that's a really important part, that's not a practical thing, but we must, before going to bed, we must believe and leave the matter from our hands into God's hands. So surrender our will into God's will without any fear, without any regret. And then we go to sleep.
Okay, good.
It's been such beautiful teaching. I'd like to ask Sophia, let's conclude with you praying that prayer in Arabic and let us just absorb that. And then, so we so look forward to seeing you all next week. And Sophia, thank you so much. And let's end with hearing that in Arabic.
I would love to. Let me quickly bring it up on my screen so I can read it from my screen. That's a good idea to do that. If I can find it. Yes, I found it. Okay. So I am so sorry for all this, but today I'm doing everything by myself, so I'm a little behind on these things. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the infinitely merciful. Allahumma inni astakhiruka bi-ilmika wa astaqdiruka bi-kudratika wa as'aluka min fadlikal azim. فإنك تقدر ولا أقدر وتعلم ولا أعلم وأنت علام الغيوب اللهم إن كنتم تعلمون أن هذا الأمر خيري لي في ديني ومعاشي وعاقبي أمري فاقدره لي ويسره لي ثم بارك لي فيه وإن كنت تعلم أن هذا الأمر شر لي في ديني ومعاشي وعاقبة أمري فاصرفه عني واصرفني عنه واقدر لي الخير حيث كان ثم أردني به. Amen.
Amen. And blessings to you with your discernment. We hope we see you next week. Thank you, Sophia. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.